Indiana trusts you to choose the President of the United States, Governor, U.S. Senator, Congress, State House, State Senate, but apparently you are too fragile to choose your own Attorney General. And that is where things get stupid. Because for some of Indiana's most important statewide offices, Attorney General, Secretary of State, Treasurer, Comptroller, Lieutenant Governor, you do not directly choose the nominee in the primary. Delegates do. People most voters cannot identify in a police lineup, and somehow this is treated like normal. Tradition, party process, grassroots representation, which is political language for please stop asking questions. Absolutely not. We are asking all the questions. Because if voters are trusted to choose governor, why are they suddenly too delicate for attorney general? If democracy works for Congress, why does it need a VIP section for Secretary of State? That is tonight's episode. Who gets chosen this way? Who the delegates are? And why the system still exists? And why I believe it should end. Because democracy should not require insider instructions. And if the people cannot choose you, maybe the job should not be yours. Let's begin. Welcome back to Hold 'em Accountable. I'm Derek Holder, political troublemaker and someone who firmly believes if democracy needs a flowchart, we have already made a mistake. Tonight, we are talking about one of the least understood systems in Indiana politics, the convention delegate system. And if your first reaction is, wait, what convention? Exactly. That is the problem. Most voters assume every important office gets decided the same way, primary election. Winner moves forward, November decides the rest. Simple, except for some statewide offices. That's not what happens. And these are not ceremonial jobs. Attorney General shapes legal fights. Secretary of State oversees elections. Treasurer handles public money. Lieutenant Governor influences major statewide policy. These offices matter, which makes it strange that the average voter gets shut out of choosing them directly. This is not anti-party. Parties matter. Grassroots work matters. Delegates matter. I'm a delegate at the Democratic State Convention. This is not an attack on delegates. It is a challenge to a system where the voters are too often spectators to decisions they should be making themselves. That is the fight, not personalities, structure. Because structure decides outcomes long before speeches do. So let's start with the offices you thought you were voting for, but weren't. Indiana has two political systems, the front door and the back room. The front door is familiar. Governor, Congress, State House, State Senate, straight primary. Everybody understands the assignment. Then there's the back room, convention offices, Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, Secretary of State, Treasurer, Comptroller. These are powerful statewide offices. Voters do not directly choose the nominee. Delegates do. That should raise some eyebrows, especially the Secretary of State, the office that helps oversee elections, chosen through a system most voters cannot explain without a dry erase board. That is not illegal. It's just weird, and weird deserves scrutiny. Because if voters can choose the president, I think we can survive the treasurer selection. The real question is simple. Why are voters trusted for some offices, but not others? That question makes people uncomfortable. Good, it should. Because once you ask it, the answers get thin fast. And that leads us to the next question. Who exactly are these delegates? Because if they are choosing nominees, we should probably know who they are. Full disclosure. I am a delegate at the Democratic State Convention. So yes, I am inside the machine while criticizing the machine. I call that research. Sounds better than hypocrisy. And that matters because this conversation needs honesty. Delegates are not appointed out of thin air. In Indiana, convention delegates are on the party primary ballot. Voters choose them. If not enough delegate seats are filled, county party leadership can appoint the remaining spots. That part matters because critics sometimes get this wrong. Delegates are elected. This is a representative democracy. Just like the House of Representatives is representative democracy. That principle itself is not the problem. The problem is visibility. Most voters have no idea what delegate races actually mean. They do not realize those delegate votes may determine who becomes Attorney General, Secretary of State, Treasurer, Lieutenant Governor, or Comptroller. That is the issue, not illegitimacy, obscurity. Because if voters do not understand the power they are delegating, consent gets cloudy. Most people see delegate names at the bottom of the ballot and think, sure, probably Steve. That is not meaningful civic engagement. That is ballot roulette. Delegates are often good people, neighbors, teachers, union members, volunteers. This is not about attacking them. It is about asking why the final choice for statewide office moves from millions of voters to a much smaller room. That deserves an answer. The defense of this system is always the same: tradition, grassroots representation, party unity, candidate vetting. And to be fair, some of that is true. America is not a pure democracy. We are a constitutional republic, a federal republic. Representation is built into the system. You elect legislators. You elect representatives. You do not personally vote on every law. That makes sense. You cannot fit 330 million Americans into one committee meeting. Family group chats already prove that we cannot govern 12 people. Representation is necessary, but choosing your party's nominee for Attorney General? That's different. That is not governing. That is candidate selection. That is the front door of democracy. And at the front door, voters should not need a middleman. That is the difference, not representation itself. Unnecessary political middle management. Smaller rooms are easier to manage, easier to predict, easier to protect. That is why insiders defend the system. Not because delegates are evil, because smaller rooms create comfort. Politics loves comfort. Democracy is supposed to be messy. If your nomination process feels too comfortable, it probably is. That is why I do not believe statewide offices should be protected from voters. They should be accountable to them directly. Here's the fix: put every statewide office on the same primary ballot: Attorney General, Secretary of State, Treasurer, Comptroller, Lieutenant Governor. No exceptions. If the office affects every Hoosier, every party voter should have a direct say. That should not be radical. That should be the obvious. People will say primaries are expensive. Yes, democracy is expensive. So is public distrust. People will say conventions protect parties from weak candidates. No, voters protect parties from weak candidates. That is literally the job. And if your party cannot trust its own primary voters, that is not a voter problem. That is a party problem. Delegates should help organize the party, build grassroots strength, shape platforms. Absolutely. But should they replace direct voter choice for statewide nominations? Influence? Yes. Replacement? No. That is the line, and Indiana crossed it a long time ago. Party insiders choosing nominees voters never touched. Candidates campaigning for delegate lists instead of communities. Tradition used as camouflage for bad systems. Fold all of it hard. Delegates as real grassroots organizers. Direct primaries for every statewide office. Same office, same ballot, same voters. Hold that forever.
Oh, hi there. Do you live in Indiana? Are you watching this video? Come on in. I'm Blythe Potter. I'm running for Secretary of State. I'm a veteran, small business owner, a mom, and a lifelong Hoosier. I'm building a grassroots campaign focusing on talking to the people, not the establishment. So help me spread the message that Hoosiers deserve better from our elected officials. Oh, hey, before you go, introduce yourself in the comments and share this with a fellow Hoosier. Bye now.
Most people think democracy looks like November: signs, TV ads, a sticker, a ballot. But power usually moves much earlier than that, in delegate races, in filing deadlines, in county meetings with bad coffee and folding chairs, in convention halls where a few thousand people help decide offices that affect millions. That's where power moves, quietly, before most people know the game started. Now let me be crystal clear. Delegates are not the enemy. Confusion is. Invisible power is. A system that asks voters for trust without giving them clarity is. America is a republic. Representation matters. Delegates are legitimate representation, but not every office needs a middleman. Congress does. Choosing your attorney general does not. That is the difference. At the front door of democracy, voters should not need permission to participate. That should be direct, clear, obvious. Because once the process becomes harder to understand than the office itself, it stops serving voters and starts serving itself. That's where trust dies. So remember this: if the people cannot directly choose you for statewide office, maybe we should ask why, not angrily, not recklessly, but honestly. Because democracy does not need more back rooms, it needs more front doors. And if democracy has a back room, our job is to turn the lights on. So stay informed, ask questions, and as always, hold them accountable.